For those of us who've joined us in Napa before, you know the B2SMB Institute Leaders Forum is special. It's a special location, a special venue, and best of all, special people. We pride ourselves on curating an A-list of attendees, the best and brightest leaders of our $500 billion plus business to small business marketplace. And every day we are adding speakers, workshops, and special events to this intimate forum, all of it highlighting the shared challenges and opportunities in a setting that drives casual and candid exchange. Join us at the 2022 B2SMB Institute Leaders Forum, May 11th and 12th in Napa, California. Tickets are on sale now at b2smbi.com/leadersforum22. Hey, good day, everybody. Dave Walker here with the B2SMB Institute. And as promised, with a theme of looking forward into the future for 2022, we wanted to bring in some subject matter experts to talk futures, and specifically wanted to bring in somebody to talk futures of the tech stack in its entirety, frankly, that we use to support the sales and marketing and service of small businesses. And about 2 months ago, I saw an article in the Drum and a column, and it was written by our guest, Scott Gillum from Carbon Design. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate the invitation to be here today.
Well, it was really the title of your column that caught my attention and really prompted me to invite you. What was the title of that column?
Yeah, invested millions in your MarTech stack and your B2B performance still sucks.
Yeah, that's the word right there. That I think that gets every executive committee's attention. Well, with the idea of actually sucking less, I wanted you to come in and really talk through the major points that you were making in that article, but use it as a springboard really to talk more expansively about the role of the tech stack and really the philosophy behind the tech stack, the strategy behind it as we move into the future. So why don't you give us kind of a high-level overview of the main points that you were trying to make in the column when you wrote it?
Yeah, and I should give a little bit of background so that people understand where I was coming from to be able to say that. So I've spent 25 plus years in sales and marketing, especially around performance. I have a background in management consulting that was really driven around looking at numbers and analytics, and so really looking at how do we drive performance. And founded Carbon Design 5 years ago, and we have developed over the last 3 years what we call performance-based marketing or personality-based marketing. And so we actually go in and look at taking deals apart, taking information out of systems and looking at what really happens, and then looking at the individuals who are involved in a purchase decision. And it's typically, 15, 20 months, and we're pulling data. And that information that we've been able to look at, is where I've gotten to a point of being able to say, we've invested all this money in these technologies that give us scale, but it doesn't improve our performance. And part of that issue is that we have this mentality of machinery now. The more we use the technologies, the more that we look at thinking about the world in very rational ways. And we miss a lot, in particular in B2B, we miss a lot of these elements that are involved in the buyer's journey that aren't being captured anywhere in our stacks.
And it's that personality-based marketing approach that I guess I want to unpack a little bit more. Is it simply profile attributes? Is it behavioral attributes? What are the factors that go into identifying the different personalities?
Yeah, so we use DISC segmentation, and that's 4 personality categories: dominant, influencer, steady, and then conscientious. And within those, then there are 3 sub personality types for in that, and it really gets to psychographic information. So motivations, behaviors, And what's fascinating is when you look at what happens, when you put together the buyer's journey and involve all the people in the buyer's journey. And we sit down with sales to do this. We take it out of Salesforce and we talk with salespeople, and then we scrape everything out of whatever marketing automation tool that they have at the account level, and we put it all together. You start to see that personalities really matter. And here's what ends up happening with, if you're only measuring rational factors. And when I say this, most of our technologies that we're using are glorified task lists and checklists. Like they're tracking something. They're trackers and they're checklists. That's what we have to work with, right? And so if someone hits a certain piece of content, they get a score and we watch them, right? But what the problem is, if you understand the personality types, you'll realize there's two personalities that have a tendency to be able to, that are scanning the horizon constantly looking for information. They actually have different preferences in the information that they want, but they create false positives in our tools as it relates to intent. One personality type is C-level or VP or higher, constantly scanning. These are the influencers. They're constantly seeking information. The problem is they don't do anything with it. They're seeking information to give to someone else. So if we're not tracking shares, if we're only tracking what's being consumed, right, downloads, and we're not tracking what's sharing, which we often aren't, we're not really seeing what's happening. And so we get a C-level comes by, hits our content, attends a webinar, whatever it is. Oh my God, we put them in lead nurturing. They don't do anything. Right? They don't surface, and nothing happens. They're too high level. They're searching for information for someone else. They're going to give it to them, but it stays in our system as that we've got intent here.
So circling back on the question of the tech stack itself, is it a matter that current tech stacks really can't perform these functions or simply don't perform these functions? They're not applied correctly? Or is it, which is it basically? If I'm sitting now and I accept the fact that, oh, that's really interesting that an influencer is somebody who consumes, but really what's important is they pass along. Right. Are our current technologies capable of capturing that?
Yes, they are. You put it in a contact record. Yes. So you can enable the ability to be able to track sharing. Absolutely. And you can, inside of Salesforce, inside of the contact record, enable we just did it with a client. There's a section where you can put personality type. And then once you have personality type against buyers, then you can watch their behaviors and understand whether or not you're producing and creating the right kind of outreach, content, information that really appeals to that type of person.
So do you since so many of B2B businesses, and I would argue B2SMB businesses, are still kind of grounded in account-based marketing, in those ABM that ABM approach, what are some of the things that are keepers within ABM combined with PBM, and what are the things that you really start to ignore in ABM?
Right. I mean, ABM is a nice step forward, trying to understand what the needs are of that account. And this is just another step even further in understanding the individual needs that sit inside of that account. And understanding the account is important because that is an environment in which people operate, right? So to understand what's important to that account in terms of what their focus is, what their priorities are, understanding how to get better aligned in terms of what their needs might be from content and having a plan to do that in a way that you have a regular cadence. All those things are good. It just needs to get to the next level.
So let's do a little role play here. So I am a CMO for a very large business to small business brand. I have, over 1 million small business customers. I want to grow it. My ambitions are to grow it, double it within the next 18 months. What are some of the quote intake questions that you ask of me when you're really kind of looking at my current MarTech stack?
So I would start with your audience, and I would ask you, who is your audience? And the first part of where we start is understanding your audience type and what you end up. So we will take either existing customers or prospects or a segment of the marketplace that you're looking at, and we will run profiles on those individuals. And we'll take a subset. We don't need a lot, right? So we'll run, let's say 1,000 names of customers, right, through through our systems, and we'll say you have an overabundance or an over indexing of this personality type or this personality. There's usually two, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's two personality types that over index in every industry. So if you're targeting, let's say professional services firms,
Mm-hmm.
there are two personality types that are dominant in professional services.
Mm-hmm.
Once we know that, then we say, okay, those two personality types have a tendency to have these kind of behaviors. They like to see this kind of information. They like to have, and we've been able to also equate where they will land inside the organization. They have the tendency to take on these roles, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to find this kind of person in this particular kind of role. And then you can understand what's the right information. So those personality types have preferences in terms of the information that they want to see and how they want to see it, right?
Mm-hmm.
One personality type wants it high level, very visual, videos do extremely well, infographics, right? Another personality type wants white papers, a lot of detail, case studies, research, data backed. Then you understand that, and then you understand how to then guide your ABM programs specifically into those audience sets. But we have a tendency, and it's because of scale, I believe, to equate that there's only one personality type in a role. Mm-hmm. A CFO is, all CFOs are created the same. And we know that not to be true. But we create one persona, we create one piece of content that goes to that same persona, even though deep down inside, we know there are different people sitting in that role, but we put everything at the role or title level without understanding that there's an individual there.
Mm-hmm. And then does the as we're talking through this, and I'm discovering what the different personality types are that are particular to the target audience that I'm going after. I guess then what? Then what do you start to work on as far as the implementation of both reaching and engaging and qualifying and closing and all the other steps that go into the sales cycle?
Yeah, and this is part of the reason why our performance is so bad. We love to throw out nets and drag nets back to see what comes back. That's the way marketing, right?
Yeah, it's a great analogy. It is actually a perfect one. Oh, look, fish.
Yeah, it is, because we have these very powerful tools that can give us scale. Mm-hmm. We confuse activity for performance, and it is super hard to disrupt that cycle. Mm-hmm. So we're just pumping things out. I think in the article I referenced, if you want a good benchmark, go to HubSpot. HubSpot has real-time data from 103,000 users on marketing performance, and email performance is down 30% last year. And that's on top of a 30% decline the prior year. And what do? We send 40% more emails.
Right.
So it's a vicious cycle. So the first thing that we do is we start taking things off of your targeted list. We will tell you who's DOA, right? Mm-hmm. There's no reason you reach out to this type of audience. They are not going to respond to any kind of marketing outreach. It's just not their personality type. Mm-hmm. So before we would get blocked or we would get spammed and everything, now we have the ability to have the insight ahead of time before we hit go on a campaign to know that there are audiences out there that will never respond to us, and we can take those off the list. And right there, you take 30% off of your list, which is usually the minimum. We'll take 30% off. You're already starting to improve your performance.
Yeah, but let me ask you, how does this apply to specifically prospecting, which is always a challenge of and what leads us down, many of us down the path of, well, I have to use profile attributes because that's the only third-party data I can actually buy for a prospect.
Yeah, just start with your own customer base. Like, who is buying your product or your service? Understand the personality types you have right now that are, for whatever you're offering, it appeals to someone. Understand who that appeals to. We don't even do that, right?
Right.
Just start with that. Just start understanding who your customers are at a different level. Then you start to think about, how do we change things? And I think the other thing that you do is you start to look at what happens inbound. We just do work. Here's a great example in cybersecurity. Incredibly difficult audience to reach. In fact, they don't even show up in anybody who works in cybersecurity, like a chief information security officer, they don't put it in their title. They don't want you to know. Nobody wants to know, right?
Right.
But what you realize once you understand that audience is because of their personality types, Word of mouth is everything to them. Most credible source is everything. Once you understand that, you realize everything that I do from an outreach standpoint has to improve my credibility or my reputation.
Mm-hmm.
Because someone telling someone else about our service is how we're going to get business. And tracking what happens inbound, which isn't very often captured for marketing, is really important. So we just did this project, same thing, just said, look, this audience is everything about most credible source. 80% of the information they consume comes from a peer.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now you got to figure out the quality of the information that you're putting out into the public domain, right? Is it consistent? Is it research and data backed? Is it sourced? Once you understand that, you understand that there are really things that you can do internally to make things better, and then start to track. So marketing never tracked source of the leads as it related to referrals.
Mm-hmm.
And next thing you know, they're doing it. And we got an email that the last half dozen leads that came in were all referral based.
Mm-hmm.
And they knew where they came from, right?
Right.
So it's raising the awareness of there are things that are happening out there that we can get much smarter about. If you never thought as a marketer, and by the way, this particular customer sent 70 emails to a person who was in an active sales process.
Mm-hmm.
They still closed the deal. He responded to 0 of the emails.
Right.
He was in the cycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Marketing, sales, not getting together, not talking. So once you get smarter about your audience, you can get a lot smarter about what you do.
Well, let's talk about.
You don't have to do as much.
Right. I mean, it's both more effective, but also more efficient as well. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that marketing to sales connection and how basically the PBM process really helps that handoff between marketing and sales, and vice versa, that feeds back from sales into marketing.
It's super fascinating. And again, anybody who's watching this, I would encourage you to take 2 or 3 deals that have happened in the past year, and then pull all the information out of your marketing systems and look at what happens and what is going on inside of that account during that sales cycle. Mm-hmm. So it's 15 months, right? Look at the interactions, get the salespeople together and the marketing people, scrape all the information and watch what's happening. Mm-hmm. Because there's incredible insights you can get. So I'll give you an example. There's a deal that happened in life science in Asia. You're watching who's consuming virtual events, webinars, right? Downloading white papers. And we're watching all this, right? And suddenly the decision maker shows up at about month 12. And her personality type is conscientious. Conscientious are skeptics. Mm-hmm. Skeptics are concerned about reducing risk. Mm-hmm. They're not reward driven, right? You can't say get 20%, 30% this uplift, improvement. It doesn't apply, doesn't work with them at all. It's about risk reduction for this person, right? So if you see this person come in, then you realize, we've got a person who's conscientious. What we need to do is get client referrals to them. So they need to talk to someone else about our services, right? We need to find ways to reduce risk. She came into the deal, she unbundled it. She took a deal down that was over 300,000 down to 150,000. You could have predicted that. If you saw that person show up, you could have told the salespeople, the conscientious person's in here, they're a decision maker. You need to reach out and you need to provide client case studies, client referrals, anything to make them comfortable with the risk that they're going to take.
Mm-hmm. So the next piece of the flow is the service after the sale, and in particular, I guess, focus on the delivery and the adoption of the product or service. Something that many of our members struggle with is that they're successful in selling in a SaaS-based application for any number of different functions, and it metaphorically stays on the shelf in shrink wrap. It doesn't really get adopted. How does this? How does the PBM approach really kind of help with that?
It's an excellent point. There is one type of personality that we call the champions that carry things forward. They're the project managers. They're the ones who move things inside of organizations. You've got to find those in the organizations. They're the ones, and here again, this is about understanding them. This champion type of personality likes to own something, like to own a project, like to own a department, and they're driven by their career, career success. So if you get inside the organization and you have a tool that you believe can help this person personally succeed in their career, make their team better, right? Get recognition. This person is very recognition driven and very ambitious. You have to then position your product to say, here's how we're going to help you do this, right? You have to make it personal to them. If they see a stake in it for them, they'll jump on it and they'll run with it. If you can't connect it to them in a way that makes it personal for them, they won't do anything with it.
It's fascinating. And I want to kind of loop back. I mean, ostensibly, we started this conversation about the tech stack that really supports kind of this whole thing. I know we don't have a whiteboard in front of us, but can you give us kind of of everything you've described, give us a little bit of a kind of a visual representation of now what, or even a comparison of old tech stack versus new tech stack to support kind of this strategic approach that you're talking about?
Yeah, I love that because I get to talk with my hands on it.
Right.
Over here is your tech stack.
Right.
You're enabled already for scale, right? So now you just got to get better with how you aim this gun. And that says we got to get smarter about what we have. We've already made the investment. How do we start to get a better ROI on that investment? And so it's about analyzing what comes back and what doesn't come back. And this is something I mentioned in the article, which is called survival or selection bias. We have a tendency to only focus on what comes back to us, the 3% open rate or the 10% click-through rate or whatever it is. We're dealing with very small numbers. What we should be looking at are the bigger numbers of the 90% that doesn't come back to us. Why doesn't that happen, right? And diving into, we have a tendency to just shoot the gun, reload it, fire that gun again, reload it, fire that gun, with ever stopping just to take apart what happened in that campaign or whatever it might be in terms of the outreach, a webinar or a virtual event or whatever it is. We very rarely stop to dissect and understand what happened. Why didn't we get better performance out of this? And so is it about the way that we're writing the header for the webinar in terms of the topic, right? So let's start doing some A/B testing. And before we pull the trigger, let's go out and do A/B testing. Is it the type of speaker that we're offering up? So let's try some pilots and offer different types of speakers. Subject matter expert, client, experiment. Again, that's an important thing. You have all these very powerful tools now. Let's set them up to be able to test, to be able to experiment, capture the data, take a look at the data, understand what's going on, and then think about what do we need to do to get better. It's not necessarily tech stack, it's how we're using it that has to change.
Fascinating. Does it require a degree, does the personality-based approach require a degree of, I'll just describe it as creative training? In other words, you not only do you have to know that what an influencer wants, it's also how you talk to them. That's what I hear you saying. And is that require kind of a retraining of all of the marketing folks, the copywriters who sit around and basically know how to hit the buttons from a profile description of what a prospect is, but don't necessarily know how to hit the mark when it comes to these personalities?
Yeah, I don't mean to offend anybody about what I'm about to say here, but I'll say it. And it's unfortunate. And it's because of all this overinvestment in technologies that we have people who are slave to the machinery. They're very good at understanding how the technology works, but they're not good at understanding how to make the technology work for them. They don't understand the important things about what goes through the machine, right? It's how do I create a call to action that gets someone's attention, right? How do I create a headline to get someone's attention? How do I take them through a customer journey that makes sense for them? How do I understand how to create something that is going to appeal to someone that will forward it to someone else? How do I start to try? The fundamentals of what makes really good marketing are being skipped for feeding the engine of, I got to get something out the door this month. So let's assemble the content that's going to go. We'll grab that, and then we'll grab this list from over here, and we'll do this kind of digital advertising over here, and we just throw it together. And it's very rare that you actually see, when you step back, to say, okay, what was the strategy of this campaign? Was it just the fact that you had to get something out the door, hit a headline or a title, an audience, you had to do it at a certain, frequency because of that's what the calendar dictates. It's like, what are you trying to do from a strategy standpoint? What are we trying to get accomplished here? And then let's design around that. Let's design it around an outcome. What's the goal here? And then start working backwards off that.
I mean, I hear you loud and clear, and I'm not offended by it as someone who was an ex-copywriter way back in a prior life.
Hey, copywriting is incredibly important.
Incredibly important. I think, I don't know how you'd react to this, but so much of our legacy of applying CRM has been in creating very extensive and elaborate trees, a whole bunch of if this happens, then we say this, if this happens, we say that. Is there something in the PBM approach that really disrupts that, or that is different than really what still fundamentally is a CRM-ish kind of approach that like I described?
Yeah, it adds that missing piece that I was mentioning before through the buyer's training. Years ago, 10, 15 years ago, we finally got everybody on the same page that buying is not a linear process.
Right.
People got that, right? We're now trying to get people to accept is that buying isn't just a rational process. Sales just isn't a numbers game, it's a mind game. Right? We have humans involved, right? If we didn't have humans at the end making decisions, this wouldn't be complicated, right? We didn't have humans that are sitting inside of a buying group and bouncing off of each other because they have different personality types and they have different motivations of what they want. This would be much easier, but that's the reality we live in, right? Organizations have cultures. People are inside of those cultures and they behave differently. So if a deal stops halfway through, the organization has lost its motivation to solve whatever problem that you have a solution for. So you need to figure that out. And so what's really interesting is when we start to talk to salespeople about why they lost deals, for example, they'll say, it's because they have a previous relationship with that company. What that really means is that that's a trust issue. That's not, it's because they knew them already. It's because they trusted them. And that doesn't show up in any of our systems. All this stuff that's related to these human elements that are involved in buying don't show up in our systems, right? And so it's a matter of going beyond that. Like you lost a deal, you said it was because the other guy had, was less expensive. That's not the reason why.
Right.
You probe on that. Losing a deal because of cost is never the reason. And so it's putting those things into our tools and then looking and using them. It's about tracking them. It's adding this part of the buyer's journey that we do not include because it's harder to manage. You have to start people, you have to teach salespeople how to manage different types of personality type. And that's the reality. And good salespeople and do it intuitively. They already know how to change their approach based on who they're talking with, right? But again, they don't put it in any type of system so we can start to understand it better, right? So it's just putting in these pieces that are missing that we know are important, but they don't fit into the machinery.
So speaking of the machinery, the role of artificial intelligence and machine learning in this kind of tech stack of the future. Can you talk about that a little bit? I mean, is it vital for scale that you have some sort of assistance to really make what arguably are complicated observations or complicated applications of what you've observed?
So there are AI tools that will help you do personality profiling, like XIQ. Right? If you're going to make any more investment in your MarTech stack, invest in personality profiling, and there are tools out there, and XIQ is a great tool, and that's what we use. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Could you?
No, I mean, I think well, just to put you back on the track of it, I think XIQ, yes. I mean, and really the ability to just collect the data. Yes. But then in the what I would imagine is still a complex decision tree, or set of steps, actions that need to be taken through the process, through the life cycle. What role does artificial intelligence and machine learning play in this? And is it frankly a requirement?
Yeah, well, I could have used a little AI right there to help me with where we're at that conversation. I think here's the unfortunate thing. AI works off of past data, and it's going to pull past rational data, and it's going to give you predictions on what it sees that has happened in the past. And so it's going to assume that certain things are going to happen without fully understanding the fact that you have an individual that's a human on the other end of the purchase. So it's going to pull all the information that's sitting inside the tech stack right now. There's all rational elements that says this particular buyer at this particular industry, at this particular size company, with this particular role inside the organization is going to be interested in these things. That's not necessarily true. And so I can tell you already, having worked with AI tools as it relates to personality types, we already see bias in those tools. And this is the same thing. We're just going to be able to go faster and more scale. And it's going to be like, this is what it's going to be like. You buy a house, right? And next thing you know, because that becomes public domain, right? You start getting solicitations for lawn care. Does that show any kind of personalization? This is what's going to happen is that we're going to be able to say, just like going on Amazon, you bought this, here are other things that other people like you have purchased. That's what's going to happen in B2B, and it's not necessarily true.
And so then does that imply that really one does need to have that human kind of judgment throughout this process? And again, does that require kind of a different level of training and attention and job description and all the rest?
Yeah, and I would say that the last few years, that's what we've been doing, is teaching marketers what a persona really looks like. Personas have the person in it. Most personas don't. They have a title or role. So we're putting people inside of personas. We're showing buyer's journeys that show behaviors, right? There's behaviors in that buyer journey. These types of people show up over here because they're motivated to do that. It's within their personality set, right? So AI can be great because if we can incorporate that, that's going to give us an advantage in the way that we approach our audiences. And I hope it does get incorporated. My concern is because it's not there now, this machine learning is going to be pulling all the information that's sitting inside our cycle in our databases right now. They're all oriented around scaling and volume. And taking deal history and then equating, thinking that it's absolutely true, that this person that has this title and this role inside of an organization of this size in this industry is going to do this.
I can't remember where I read this, but it was a great column on the application of artificial intelligence. And the gist of it was similar to something you said earlier. It was AI is the gun that you take out to hunt rabbits. You kill a white rabbit and it says, you need to do nothing but shoot at white rabbits for the rest of eternity. And ignore not only all the other colored rabbits, but the fact that, gosh, there's a great little grouse sitting there or something else that is just as good. So this has been a fascinating conversation, and I think that I guess I'll conclude by asking, when you are helping a senior team kind of really assess the opportunity, assess the changes required, do you find yourself using the PBM approach and kind of looking around the table and identifying, I know who each of you are and what you're really expecting, and are you eating your own cooking, I guess?
Yeah, we are. In fact, our ABM programs are built around mapping out the buyers in our accounts and understanding who they are as people, and it makes sense. And even more than that, we help our clients internally with the people that they interact with and getting things through the system. So we help them understand the people that they're working with to get progress inside their organization. So we do. I mean, we should. Right? We should. This is all about learning and learning smarter ways to do things. And I don't want people to stop learning. It's time to stop and say, okay, performance isn't good and that's not good enough. We're going to have to figure out how to get better. And we want to learn about how to get better. So that's all I'm saying is don't accept the performance that you're getting right now.
Mm-hmm.
Start to really look at it instead of we got a 5% response rate of it's a 95% failure rate. If you start turning around your performance into looking at what really happens, you'll start to say, I'm not going to accept that kind of performance anymore. Or at least I hope you do.
Right. And back again to the beginning of the title of your article, your suggestion wasn't that your tech stack sucks as much as it was the fact that your performance sucks. And I think I highlight for everyone that you said very clearly, this is not about blowing up your tech stack. It's applying the tools in the correct way. I think you and I have both been kind of in this space for quite a while, and we know how oftentimes the tool gets blamed for the operator. For the problem with the operation or the application of the tool. And that's really where it shakes out.
I was client side as the head of marketing, I don't know, 20 years ago. And I would love to have some of the tools that we have available today. Mm-hmm. I really would have loved it. And you're exactly right. I'm not saying that they're bad. I'm just saying they're very powerful. And you can use them for throwing the net out, or you can use it to go fishing specifically to catch a certain type of fish. And it's not about doing more now, it's about doing better.
Mm-hmm. Well, this has been, again, as I said, it's been fantastic. We'll provide a link both to the ebook that you guys have created on personality-based marketing, which I had a chance to really digest a couple of times, and it's quite extraordinary. I mean, it's really one of the most thoughtful and detailed descriptions of really a very new strategy, an approach that I really hadn't heard of before. And shame on me, you guys have been around for 5 years, but you've grown enormously. I mean, you're one of the higher ranked agencies now in the country. Is that right?
Yeah, we've grown very, very quickly, and we're starting to get some recognition. So we appreciate that. Again, we're not about just doing things blindly. We're about helping organizations get better. I mean, we could have a much bigger business if it was just executing campaigns without any thought to what they produce. And that's not what we're going to do.
Well, listen, I hope a number of our audience members reach out to you, because I think it's if nothing else, it's a fascinating conversation and a diagnostic of how you're doing things now versus how you might be able to successfully do things in the future. So thanks for being part of Forward 22, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Dave.